A Fortune 50 pharmaceutical giant brought to its knees not by code locked behind ransomware, but by a new breed of attacker who turned data into a weapon and trust into a liability. And at the center of it all, a shadowy cyber gang called Dark Angels. This isn't sci-fi, it's the meticulously orchestrated reality of the largest ransomware payout ever made. And almost no one in the public knows the full story. Tonight, we expose the anatomy of a perfect cybercrime. A heist without malware, an extortion without encryption, a corporate panic so profound it was buried beneath layers of non-disclosure agreements and legal maneuvers. Who were the attackers? Why was their victim, one of the most powerful corporations in America, so uniquely vulnerable? And what does this scandal mean for every business, patient, and government contract still living in blissful ignorance? The rules have changed, the threat is invisible, and by the end of this episode, you may never trust your company's data or your own security the same way again. Welcome to Cybercrime History. Dark Angels. The name alone stirs up images of masked crusaders, but make no mistake, these weren't heroes. Emerging in 2022 from the digital fog, Dark Angels didn't boast or bluster like their predecessors. Instead, their calling card was silence. No defaced websites, no showy ransom notes, no viral Twitter taunts. For them, hacking was an art, one best practiced in the shadows. Analysts first connected their digital fingerprints to breaches at mid-sized European firms, but investigators quickly spotted the hallmarks of a crew with deeper experience. Forensics matched their tools, techniques, and cryptocurrency laundering patterns to Russian-speaking groups like Conti and the infamous Revil Syndicate. But what set Dark Angels apart was their refusal to play by the rules even other criminals followed. Traditional ransomware is loud, a sledgehammer that encrypts data and demands payment to restore it. Dark Angels chose a surgeon's scalpel instead. Pure extortion. Their approach was simple. They stole as much sensitive data as possible, threatened to leak it, negotiated in private to maximize payment, and vanished before anyone was the wiser. The world got its first warning in 2023 when Johnson Controls, a global building technology firm, received a ransom demand. Pay $51 million or risk the exposure of sensitive client blueprints and government security plans. Most dismissed it as bluster, until the company quietly paid, and the data never surfaced. Analysts at Zscaler and Tripwire traced Dark Angels' operations with chilling precision. They didn't act like script kiddies or lone wolf extortionists. They acted like corporate spies. Criminals with the patience and discipline of professionals, melting into networks for weeks or months, studying workflows, learning the language of their targets, and most insidious of all, exploiting the very trust that business depends on. And as the next act would reveal, they were about to escalate. Dark Angels craved status, and they found the perfect victim. Cencora Inc., formerly AmerisourceBergen, sits at the silent crossroads of America's healthcare system. With annual revenues north of $200 billion, Cencora is responsible for the seamless distribution of pharmaceuticals to hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies nationwide. Behind Cencora's fortified firewalls were drug supply chain contracts worth billions, sensitive personal health information protected by the strictest HIPAA regulations, federal and military medical data underpinning critical government operations, and emails, research communications, and pricing strategies that could topple markets in a heartbeat. For cybercriminals, this wasn't just a jackpot, it was the gold vault at Fort Knox. But Dark Angels didn't come crashing through the front gate. Instead, they found a crack in the foundation. A third-party vendor with privileged access to a crucial supply chain portal. Using credentials bought from a darknet market for less than the price of a good dinner, they entered with the keys to the castle. What followed was a masterclass in modern espionage. For weeks, the attackers slowly exfiltrated 100 terabytes of data. This wasn't just files, it was the company's entire nervous system, siphoned out in the dead of night. There were no alarms, no downtime, no encrypted workstations or panicked help desk calls. In fact, Syncora's employees and partners were blissfully unaware as the company's very soul was being poured into remote servers somewhere in Eastern Europe. The threat became clear only when Dark Angels wanted it to. Pay us or the dam bursts. And the timing? Impeccable. Regulators were already scrutinizing Syncora for opioid tracking compliance and privacy obligations. A single leak could trigger devastating fines, expose patients and partners, and send the company's stock into a freefall, while giving every competitor and class action lawyer in the country a field day. This was a cataclysm, waiting for a spark. The spark arrived. A message typed in perfect, emotionless English. 75 million, 72 hours, or the world sees everything. Syncora's war room spun into controlled chaos. Imagine the stakes. If patient records were released, the company would risk government sanctions and possible criminal charges. If they refused, a resulting class action lawsuit could cost billions. If they paid, they risked fueling the next generation of criminals. But at least they would buy silence. Behind closed doors, board members debated with forensic consultants and cyber negotiators. Advice from the outside world was limited, and time was running out. The pressure ratcheted higher when Dark Angels made their threat personal. Every hour you delay, 10,000 records leak. Syncora's executives, staring down catastrophe, made their decision. The ransom, an unfathomable $75 million, was paid in Bitcoin. But this wasn't a single transaction. Chainalysis analysts mapped the flow into dozens of wallets, then hundreds, as the money split, tumbled, laundered through privacy mixers, swapped for Monero, and dispersed into the digital wind. Within 72 hours, every trace was gone. No hope of recovery, no digital trail for the FBI or Interpol to seize. Why did Syncora pay so quickly? The cost of a leak, regulatory fines, lost contracts, irreparable trust was incalculable. For a Fortune 50 firm, the difference between corporate survival and oblivion was a matter of minutes, and the math was cruel. To this day, Syncora has never officially admitted the payout. But blockchain analysis, leaked negotiations, and whispers from threat intelligence reports leave little doubt about what happened behind the scenes. And across the industry, the precedent was set. Pay quietly or risk everything. How did Dark Angels achieve the digital equivalent of walking through walls? Forget the Hollywood cliche of malware-laden USB drives or frantic typing in a dark basement. This was something far more insidious. A perfect supply chain compromise. With access granted by a trusted vendor, whose security protocols were a notch below Syncora's own, Dark Angels deployed no malware at all. Instead, they lived entirely off the land, harnessing tools already present in the network for legitimate admin work. They used Cobalt Strike for silent reconnaissance, PowerShell scripts for privileged escalation, Mimikatz to pluck cached passwords from memory, Rclone to stream vast quantities of data out, masked as harmless backups. No antivirus triggered, no endpoint detection system blared. Every move was blended with a surgeon's caution. On the 8th night, the attackers even disabled certain network alarms, just long enough to watch the response time, less than a minute, then back to normal, as if nothing happened. They watched login patterns, mimicked employee behavior, rerouted through home VPNs, and when they finally began extracting high-value data, they did so in the smallest increments possible, using outbound cloud storage buckets and slow drip uploads to avoid detection. By the time the theft was discovered, it was ancient history. The data, laundered through multiple cloud services and storage providers, had long since reached safety. This was not brute force or blind luck. This was the work of adversaries who had studied their target to exhaustion, who understood not just the tech, but the culture, workflow, and pressure points of their victim. As Wired reported, they didn't hack the network, they became the network. When the ransom was paid and the data returned, a chilling silence followed. Syncora, like many before and since, issued no statement, no confession, no word to shareholders apart from a vague reference to a security incident. The company's silence wasn't just a PR move, it was a signal to the entire corporate world. If it can happen to us, it can happen to you. And you'll pay too. Within weeks, cybersecurity researchers documented a surge in extortion-only attacks. No more noisy ransomware. No more system-wide lockouts. Just one cold email referencing the precise folders stolen and a threat to go public if demands weren't met. This new model emboldened criminals, who realized that the fear of regulatory exposure, embarrassment, and stock price collapse was a far more powerful lever than encrypted workstations. And it made defenders' jobs infinitely harder. How do you recover from an attack if attackers never break anything? How do you defend data when the threat comes from within, via trusted partners, shared credentials, and invisible backdoors? Behind the scenes, insurance premiums for cyber incidents soared. Regulators began rewriting rules, insisting that companies not only encrypt data at rest, but audit every vendor and monitor every byte leaving their networks. But the most tangible impact was psychological. The assurance that massive security-hardened Fortune 50 firms were immune to this kind of assault evaporated overnight. From law firms to logistics giants, banks to hospitals, every boardroom now lived with the knowledge that paying a ransom might be the least bad option. And every hacker, from small-time scammers to nation-state proxies, knew the stakes had just been raised. The Dark Angels didn't just steal Syncora's secrets. They rewrote the playbook for cyber extortion. Gone are the days of smash-and-grab encryption attacks. Today's cutting-edge ransomware groups are invisible burglars, breaking in, stealing silently, and leaving without a trace. Data-focused blackmail is now more profitable and less risky than ever. Why gamble with a noisy malware campaign when the real gold lies in the secrets you can leak? So what now? For companies, the new reality is clear. Encrypt everything, not just old backups, but live, in-use files, emails, and communications. Audit every vendor with the same rigor you apply to your own staff. Monitor outbound data flows 24/7. Treat every terabyte leaving your network as if it were your last. Adapt zero-trust architectures. Trust no one, verify everything, and layer multi-factor authentication on every endpoint. For defenders, behavioral analytics must become the norm. If a script downloads 50 gigabytes from HR records at 3 a.m., that's an alert, not a routine backup. For the criminal underworld, this is the future. Dark Angels have proved that data is power, and that well-organized, disciplined crews can extract more money through silence than through chaos. The shockwaves from the Syncora breach traveled the globe. Suddenly, every sector, not just healthcare, realized they were vulnerable. Legal firms? Imagine the value of leaked mergers and acquisitions. Insurance companies? Personal data, actuarial tables, insider communications. Government contracts? National security secrets, vendor bidding details, classified projects. All could be sold, leaked, or used as leverage. Newer extortion rings began to specialize. Some focused only on mergers, others targeted pharmaceutical research or sensitive political correspondence. Meanwhile, cyber insurance firms began rewriting policies with stricter requirements. Now, companies are told they must encrypt all P2 at rest. They must demonstrate daily outbound data audits. They must maintain a documented vendor review process. Yet for every new rule, criminals found new ways in. Ransom payouts continued, in silence, off the record. Sometimes rumored by security researchers, but rarely confirmed. A new era of cyber omerta was born, where victims and criminals both valued secrecy above all. Dark Angels, for their part, slipped mostly from view, rich, emboldened, and no doubt plotting their next move. $75 million, a number that will ring in boardrooms and IT offices for years to come. A record that may already have been broken, if only we knew. We end with a question every decision maker must now answer. If Dark Angels could do this to Syncora, with all its resources, its lawyers, its war chests, what would stop them or a copycat from doing it to you? As you finish this story, somewhere a similar negotiation is playing out. Somewhere a new attack is underway. A single compromised vendor, a single set of forgotten credentials, another trusted partner with just enough access to open the door. The digital underworld is moving faster, growing bolder, and becoming harder to trace with every passing day. Did Dark Angels just change ransomware forever? Or are we only seeing the opening act of an even darker future? Hit subscribe, stay vigilant, and remember, the cybercriminals you don't see are the ones writing tomorrow's headlines. The age of invisible extortion is here. Will you adapt or pay the price? For more thrilling stories, please like and subscribe to the Cybercrime History channel. Thanks for watching.